Hi, everyone. It's good to be back. How are you feeling this morning? Good. Maybe do that again. How are you feeling this morning? Okay, great. That's more like it. I hope not to make you cry again. No promises, though. And I'm here to talk to you about imagination activism, 1 year on since last year. I'm going to start with this image. It's quite a well-known image. 1969, a human being lands on the moon. Until that moment, it had only been a myth. It had only been present in our imaginations. And in 1962, Kennedy said, we're going to put a human being on the moon by the end of this decade. And 7 years later, it was done. Now, I'm starting with that because when Kennedy said that in 1962, most people thought, that's impossible. It's completely impossible. The moon is this far-off orb in the sky. There are myths and there's legends about the moon, but it's completely impossible that we're going to put a human being there. And in 7 years, it happened. And I bring that up because at this time, we need to do the impossible. I think most of us in this room know that the challenge ahead seems completely unfathomable. But the thing is actually we'd been to the moon thousands of times in our imagination. In 1865, there was a book that was published called From the Earth to the Moon by a French author called Jules Verne. We'd been to the moon many, many times in our imagination. Frank Sinatra had sung us to the moon. Mickey Mouse had been on the moon. Many people had already visited in their imagination. And that's the power of the imagination. And I love this quote. Longing on a large scale is what makes history. Longing on a large scale is what makes history. We need to imagine where we want to go. And we need to actually build the sense of longing in our hearts that it's possible and that we need to make it happen. Now, I have a hypothesis that right now we are going through one of the biggest planetary scale civilizational shifts that any of us have ever lived through, and actually probably the largest shift like this since the Enlightenment in the 1600s. And this shift is not a technological shift. And this is a theme I'm going to weave throughout this talk. We think that we need to come up with new technologies. We think that what we face is resource problems. But actually what we face is imagination problems. And this worldview shift we're going through, some people call it that we're moving into the age of entanglement. Some people call it the age of interbeing. We're going through a huge shift in our perception, in our imagination. And what we see right now, the hottest month ever recorded in July this year in the UK, these are all symptoms of an outdated worldview. It's not by accident that we're seeing these kinds of extreme weather events. The planet is out of balance. This year, we crossed the 6th planetary boundary. We crossed the 5th one in January last year. It hardly appeared on the news. There's a quickening in what is going on. This is a worldview that is out of date, that is causing these issues. And we have designed a system from a worldview that is out of date, that is wreaking havoc. The IMF said that, I think last year, we're subsidizing fossil fuels at $13 million a minute. That's 7% of GDP. That's double the spendage on education. We have our priorities completely wrong. And you know, we're close to breaking the Paris Agreement. We're at 1.4 degrees. It's likely that we'll reach the 2 degrees by the end of this decade. Just to make that real for you, 2 degrees means 1 billion deaths. That's the prediction. And recently a paper came out in August, which really hit home for me, which was that for every 1,000 tons of carbon that each one of us emits, that's a human life in the future generations. That's a cost of a human life. How did we get into this mess? Okay. I want you to use your imagination to imagine that you're a goldfish. Let's lighten the tone a little bit. You're a goldfish, you're swimming around, you're discovering your environment for the first time, and yeah, you're in a fish tank. You've got a wonderful little fake castle. You've got fake seaweed. It's amazing, so beautiful. You've even got a bubble machine. Ooh, bubbles. These all distract you from the fact that you're in a fish tank. And the fish tank limits your perception. The fish tank changes and impacts how you see, how you are, how you think, how you act. It's all impacting your perception, your inner development, one might say. And as you grow older, you start to get angry. You're like, I don't think this is fair. You know, every day there's a sprinkling of fish food and all of the fellow goldfish swim to the surface and you're competing for the fish food. There's never enough. And, you know, as you grow older, you decide, I'm gonna fight back. I want all fish to receive equal amounts of fish food. I want more fake seaweed. It's not enough fake seaweed. I want a better castle. You stop going to goldfish school. You glue yourself to the side of the fish tank. A better fish tank is possible. The vast majority of efforts right now are being spent on making the fish tank more habitable. Design thinking, green business, innovation, even some personal development. How can we make the fish tank more beautiful, more fair? And what my work as an imagination activist is about is to get us to yearn for the vast and endless sea, to get from the fish tank to the ocean. I want you just to take a deep breath and imagine that you're in that endless sea. The resources are abundant. You have unlimited space. There's no more fish food. There's no more tank. Now, what does this mean for us? I'll paint a little picture, but it's different for all of us, and that's what moral imagination is all about. I'm imagining a regenerative economic system where 93 cents of every dollar created does not go to the 1%. I'm imagining a world where all children have enough to eat, where all children can learn in whatever way suits them. I'm imagining a system where we center care instead of profit. That's the endless sea, and we need to yearn for that. Now, hopefully, many of you in this room identify as imagination activists. We use imagination to create new kinds of action, to change paradigms. And we're powered by what I call moral imagination. So to break that down, what is imagination? Imagination comes from the Latin term imaginari. It's about imaging what is not there. So it's about using the mind's power to create visual images and feelings and experiences. This is different to creativity, which is about creating things from the imagination. Maybe creating a more colorful fake castle. It's also different from innovation, which is changing things within the current paradigm. So that's what imagination is. And so layer on top of that moral imagination, because imagination can lead to nuclear war. It can lead to weapons. So moral imagination is about imagination on behalf of the welfare of the whole, of all beings. So what is this fish tank thinking? What is this thinking that we are moving out of in this shift, in this worldview shift? These are just a few of the different kinds of fish tank thinking there are. One, separation from nature. We see ourselves as human beings as separate from the natural world and actually on top of it, dominant. We're completely anthropocentric. We talk about human-centered design. That's like way out of date. We need more than human-centered design. Another one is short-term thinking. We make our plans in 5-year cycles, 10-year cycles, maximum. I mean, 10 years is really pushing it. We are stuck in a forever present. We don't take responsibility for the past, for the actions of our ancestors, for the historical inequities, nor do we feel a sense of responsibility to the future. There is a leftover way of thinking from the Enlightenment, which is positivist, materialist, reductionist. This is about only seeing what is material and tangible as having value. It's about only valuing that which can be proven by science as important. And it's about thinking that we can break down systems into smaller parts in order to understand them. Many people called the Age of Enlightenment the Age of Reason. Reason is supreme. Rational, analytical thinking will get us out of any mess. Well, look at the mess that it's got us into. So I'm wondering whether this next era could be the age of imagination rather than the age of reason. Yes, like that. Yes, age of imagination. Brilliant. And lastly, we're told a story which Eric just perfectly painted for us, that we're competitive, selfish human beings. That actually our purpose on this planet is to compete and to win. And look at us, we really are winning. You know, we have destroyed most of the biodiversity on this planet. Well done us, you know. So moral imagination. So in this context, I'm part of an organization which is called Moral Imaginations. And we work with people, with organizations, with leaders to help create these kinds of mindset shifts. And this is a list of some of what we found in our research. It's not exhaustive. You've got the ones that I just talked about, short-term thinking to long-term thinking, from human-centric thinking to seeing human beings as part of the web of life, moving from seeing nature as a resource for us to use, as nature is sacred, as having personhood, as requiring our respect, and as being equals to human beings, and taking responsibility for the past. And other things like, often I hear when I work with organizations, we can't do that. We don't have enough resource, we don't have enough budget. And so we're moving from we can't to how could we not? Rather than having a budget first, let's decide what we're aiming for, just like Kennedy did in 1962. We're going to put a human being on the moon. Well, how are we going to keep human beings on the earth? That's the question for this moment. And we've developed this framework which uses 3 of those shifts. The first centers around how do we build this deep empathy and connection to the future generations who also have a claim on this life on Earth. The second is designing and deciding with the more than human world. How do we start to bring the voice of nature into our organizations? Not just as a kind of sustainability, corporate kind of sustainability add-on, but really seeing nature as a stakeholder alongside human beings. And lastly, ancestors. Reconnecting with your ancestors, reconnecting with what has happened in the last couple of hundreds of years. Why does the world look the way it does? How do we undo the harms of colonization? How do we repair the wrongs of the past? Now, this work all centers on the idea that imagination is a muscle and moral imagination is a muscle. And we need to start pumping moral imagination iron every day. Every day, because we are very behind. We are very weak. Not like Arnie here, who clearly works out his moral imagination muscle. And I know that, we all like embodiment here, and that's part of the shift from this analytical, mind-based fact to actually embodiment. So I'm going to ask you very quickly to stand up. Thank you. And I'm going to ask you to put your right hand on the person in front of you. Okay? Just the right hand. Stay quiet, stay quiet. It's already a lot of intimacy for a Wednesday morning. And I'm going to ask you to put your left hand on the person to your left. Okay? So you've got right hand in front, left hand. Yeah. And now you can close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so. I'm going to ask you to sense into the hand that is on your back. And imagine for a moment that this hand is the hand of your last ancestor, whoever last left this earth, or an ancestor that comes to mind. And think of them willing you to do the courageous work of this time, willing you to help undo the things that they did, the mistakes they made, supporting you to do your work that you've come here on this earth to do. And now you can take your attention to your right hand on the person in front. Imagine that this is a member of the future generations who has not yet been born. You will never see this person's face. You will never know their name. But they're depending on you and the moral courage you have to act in this time in line with your values and in line with your moral imagination. And lastly, you can take your attention to your left hand, to the side, and imagine that you are linking with all the species on this earth and all human beings alive today. And allow your mind to conjure the image of a non-human species, whoever comes to mind, be it an orangutan, be it a tree, be it a mosquito. And I want you to promise this life form that you will do what you can to protect this earth for them. And you can take a deep breath and come back whenever you're ready. And please take a seat without speaking. We can see how we can do that. Thank you very much. So thank you very much for that. I hope you can take that exercise with you as an embodied way of keeping those other stakeholders around you. I'm not going to have time to go into these examples of the work that we've been doing. If you'd like to find out more, you can come to the workshop tomorrow. We've been working with Camden Council in the heart of London to embed moral imagination into everything they do, training 32 council officers to bring the voice of future generations and the more than human world and ancestors into their work, and to train that muscle of imagining the impossible and making it possible, training radical ambition and doing that in the heart of government. And this example is a case study we did last year with the UK government, Department of Environment, Farming and Rural Affairs, where policymakers were invited, just like you, to be chosen, to use their moral imagination, to be chosen by a non-human creature for the sake of a day. So we had the European eel, we had the algae, we had the river, and they used this perspective to make decisions in a completely different way. And what was super interesting was that this influenced their behaviors weeks afterwards. We heard people say that they went and did litter picking in their river, they joined campaigns, they went and looked up the non-human species and tried to find ways to help them. So this is the power of moral imagination, activism, shifting the way we see to shift what we do. So to wrap up, I just want to bring this image back again. We put a human being on the moon in 1969. And this was using the power of competitive, colonial, and Western imagination. And my question to you is, what could we achieve with moral imagination? Could moral imagination take us to the vast and endless sea? Thank you very much.